All right, it's the
Yeah.
holiday time, and,
Hi.
and during these holiday times, we watch holiday movies.
Yeah.
And I think one of the fascinating things about holiday films is how they can get into a little bit more absurdity, and
This is
and because
absurd,
it's the
yeah.
Christmas holiday, we kind of forego it. We talk about films like Krampus, we talk about Christmas Carols, and It's a Wonderful Life. And today we're going to talk about a film that's got a bit of a problematic past in the years since it's come out, but it's often seen as one of the great 80s comedies, one of the great screwballs.
It launched Eddie Murphy's career.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about John Landis's hit film from the 80s, Trading Places. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I am Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. You can follow the show on Twitter and on Instagram. We do have a Patreon. Check that out for some great content and some great deals to tell us what movies we should review in the future. Both Kyle and I are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out the webpage for critics' reviews as well as ours. And today we're talking about another holiday classic from the 80s.
Yeah.
It's Trading Places.
All right. The Duke brothers, two wealthy businessmen, have set a bet.
Yeah.
Take the privileged employee Louis Winthorpe III and a homeless con man Billy Ray Valentine and swap them to see if either could succeed when they trade places.
All right, is Brewster's Millions a sequel to this movie?
No, but this movie does have a sequel.
Does it really?
Well, kind of. A couple years later, John Landis would reteam with Eddie Murphy on Coming to America, and it would feature a cameo at the end of the film from Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici as the homeless versions of their characters.
Oh,
so in many ways, Coming to America is a sequel to this film.
Right.
And the Duke brothers even brought up again in Coming to America 2, which came out last year. They were brought up and referenced that they created their empire once again using money that they got from King Hakim. So that actually happened. There's a trilogy for you.
So this kind of launched multiple, I would say, Eddie Murphy's career. He was kind of like still on Saturday Night Live. He was doing stand-up, and see that maybe we can put him in a movie in almost kind of like, Rodney Dangerfield. You don't give him a script, just let him go. Just see what he can do.
Well, so the original screenplay was written for Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor.
Of
but
course.
This came on the heels of Richard Pryor when he injured himself during that fire when he was doing drugs and had to step away from acting for a little bit.
Put his
and
hair
then,
on fire.
Yeah, and so he was taken out of the film. Eddie Murphy was brought into the film. Gene Wilder elected not to do the film because he didn't want Eddie Murphy to feel like he was a Richard Pryor stand-in. He had heard that Eddie wasn't really into that whole thing, so he stepped away as well. Dan Aykroyd was brought in. Now the thing is, Dan Aykroyd had two films that had come out previously.
Neighbors?
Neighbors was one, and I can't remember the other, but they both underperformed.
Oh, 1941.
Yeah, well, that one too. Yeah, that wasn't even the one I had listed. But
Okay.
yeah, so he had two or three films that had come out that hadn't done very well. This is Eddie Murphy's second feature film after 48 Hours, where he's second fiddle to Nick Nolte.
And this is the meantime. This is Dan Aykroyd running around studios pitching, trying to get both Ghostbusters made.
Yeah, so those two guys were up and comers. Ralph Bellamy and Don Amici didn't even know these two guys, and they really admitted they didn't really know them either. Ralph Bellamy had been working for a while. He plays Randolph Duke, one of the two brothers, of course. He had been working for a while here, but Don Amici had not done a film since 1970. And he plays the other brother, so much to the point where they tried to court him, but John Landis had said, I'm pretty sure he's dead. And so they tried to court him. They found out that his residuals were being sent to his son's house in Arizona. And so he said, well, obviously, if his residuals are going to a family member, he's dead. And then someone had pointed out, no, I see him on the street corner, going to lunch every week here. And so they had to actually court Don Amici to get him to be
almost
in the
like
film.
hired a private detective to find out where Don Amici is.
And this film actually relaunched Amici's film career because he hadn't done anything for a while, but he did the Cocoon films.
Better Not Included?
Was he in that one? Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
And then he also voiced one of the animals in Homeward Bound and the sequel. So he'd kind of like got a career back up and going
in the late 80s, right? Mid 80s.
Yeah. So you have two actors of their age, of their status, who had done almost 100 films each, and you have Eddie Murphy on his second film. That's quite a juxtaposition here.
Right, and I think you're absolutely right, because I think Gene is a little more, he's very loyal, and it's understandable that you don't want to theme to Richard Pryor. You're just a fill-in.
Yeah.
And you already have done a couple movies together that you team up, Gene and Richard and stuff like that. Very interesting footnote. Richard never really wanted to have a social interaction with Gene. It was always professional. He never really did anything with them,
Yeah.
like go to dinner or meet the family or anything. They always only met on set.
Yeah, they got along. They got along
well, great, yeah.
But it just wasn't something where we're hanging out as buddies.
And
after.
Gene always like, I never understood. Come hang out with us, and he's like, yeah, he was never interested. So it's a really interesting footnote. But I think Eddie and Dan get along pretty well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I can't remember the details of why Eddie Murphy dropped out of Ghostbusters. I think he wanted a little more screen time.
I think he was looking for a launch, and that was Beverly Hills Cop time as well. So he was looking for something to propel him a bit, because he also he wanted to leave SNL. He did not have a great experience there. He wanted out, and he felt that he was being targeted by some of his jealous co-stars because he was
getting
exploding.
And then he found the content of his scripts were getting a little bit handcuffed.
Yeah.
He wanted to go a little more daring, a little more bold, but you could see with his Raw what he wanted to do.
Yeah, and you can see some of the bold choices in this film as well.
Yeah.
But before we get into those, I do want to mention Jamie Lee Curtis as well, who is seen by the studio as a bad idea for this movie because she's only done horror.
Right.
It's funny that she's an actress who's done so much non-horror.
Right. So this is she's done all those Canadian horror movies like Terror Train, Prom Night, and Halloween.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She had not had a significant non-horror role. And she said the irony of it is people always tell you when you're in horror movies you got to get naked. She goes, I didn't get asked to get naked until I went legit. And started doing
this movie, right? And then doesn't Dan Aykroyd have his pants off in this movie, right?
Yeah, so there's a lot of nudity in a non-horror film here.
John Landis is comfortable with that. Take your clothes off, right?
Yeah, exactly. The film is known.
That was a funny bit with when the cast for Animal House, and then Karen.
Karen Allen, yeah.
Karen Allen, are you comfortable taking your clothes off? And she's like, me? Well, everybody does. Look at Donald Sutherland. Take your clothes off, and he just did it. And, and they put that in the movie.
Yeah. And it works.
So, I guess if you do a John Landis movie, get ready to take your clothes off.
John Landis just keeps the camera running, and whatever he gets, he gets.
Right.
The film is known for the major controversy in recent years, and I think it's important that we have the conversation about it because it's something TCM does a lot. This film, I didn't realize until a day before I watched this for the first time that there's blackface at the end of the movie.
Yes.
And it's a major plot point.
Yes.
It came up on a Watch Mojo list, the 10 most poorly aged Christmas movies. I didn't realize that was an element in the film.
This is after, I believe it was in the script because Gene Wilder did it with a Richard Pryor movie, and I think that was already in the script.
Probably felt
that maybe you're comfortable doing it again.
Mm-hmm.
But stop.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's frustrating. It's important that it is notable and it's in the film, but it reminds me of Breakfast at Tiffany's, where I love Breakfast at Tiffany's. I think the movie is 90% brilliant. And then you get that.
Mickey Rooney.
And my wife can't watch Breakfast at Tiffany's anymore because he's just peppered in throughout the film, and it's just so unappealing to her. And I'm one of those people, like, it's an awful scene, but I know the rest of the movie is so good, I'll get past it. Yeah. This is one that's frustrating because it's part of the finale. There's no way to excise this scene. There's no way to really fix it. Yeah. And the other thing that comes down to it is it's also incredibly unnecessary. And I don't mean to say that there's ever a time when blackface is necessary. I'm not saying
because
that.
In the movie, Gene Wilder does it to get out of prison.
Yeah.
Like to hide that it's really him.
Yeah, and it's like...
And then Richard Pryor coaches him how to do it.
Yeah. But it's like,
still not an apology, but that's the reason why that's in that movie. So they can break out of prison.
But like Eddie Murphy comes out dressed as an African man, and then you get Denholm Elliott, who I think is amazing in this movie, comes out as an Irish priest, and then you get Jamie Lee Curtis, who comes out as Inga, who's doing the wrong accent, and there's some comedy to that, but she's also playing up what she looks like.
Yep.
And then you have Dan Aykroyd come in, and he's in blackface, and it's like he couldn't have been dressed as an old lady. He couldn't have been dressed, any way that's not...
like an old lady. Right?
Yeah, offensive. Because the racist humor in the film underscores the themes.
The whole theme of...
But the blackface is unnecessary.
Because on top of it is the racism, the suppression of...
Exactly.
We could use this guy as a toy anytime we want and have fun because we're bored. And then we can eviscerate the other guy because he's young and ignorant.
And so Don Amici, like a guy who doesn't like swearing, he was notable as saying he was not a fan of swearing, so he'd only do one take whenever he'd drop a swear word. And so like dropping his F-bomb, one take, that's what you're getting or you don't get it. He drops the N-word in this film, and it had to have been a really tough thing to do on camera in a movie with Eddie Murphy, but it's part of who his character is. It's offensive, but that's the character. The blackface never felt necessary to me, and it was also part of that thing in the 80s where, well, there's a black guy in the movie, so it's okay. that was always, tended to be the realization.
Well, Eddie Murphy says it all the time, so why don't we everybody say it in the movie?
Exactly. But the thing is, you got to remember, this is Eddie Murphy's second movie. I doubt that he had much sway in certain elements of this movie.
No.
So.
But you see the effectiveness of just don't give him, just let him go. Yeah. I think even for himself, he feels like he has to write in the letter, like the Pluto movie, he feels like he has to construct the jokes. But when he does, the family, when it's all, just set the camera on him and just see what happens. Right?
Yeah, he always said that this was, him and Dan Aykroyd said this was like coming to a fun location to film. And it was the only film they ever made that never felt like any work at all. Yeah, and you can kind of see that they're having a lot of fun in the narrative. I think
you can. Yeah. And it's one of those great concepts of you got to take down the rich, snobby people. Mm-hmm. But you have to show them why they're rich and snobby. And then you find like, wow, I can live that environment. But then you got Jamie Lee Curtis playing the cliche, but she plays it really well. It is a cliche, the weary old prostitute who's the world and
who's going to save him.
Who's going to save him,
but not herself.
And then the concept of they're going to corner the concentrated juice market, which is, I get a chuckle like, why that? Right.
I think it had to do, it was based on the 1980, the silver market scam that took place on the stock market.
Yeah.
And I guess orange juice just felt like
silly. It's silly.
I think part of it though is that this movie also was kind of being The Big Short before The Big Short. Where like they were dealing with a lot of these really deep cut elements in the stock market that people might not understand. So that scene where they're explaining how the stock market works to Eddie Murphy, it's funny because they're talking down to this guy because they assume he doesn't understand
they're mansplaining it to him.
Yeah, but in many ways, they're explaining it to a number of people who don't deal in the stock market. Yeah. So they're using things like, here's your bacon that is in a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich. So I think the idea is that they're explaining it really well. Eddie Murphy said he didn't understand the ending at all. He was just doing what people told him would work in the film. So it does kind of work as an entry-level course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, up next is overall kind of our review of Trading Places. Yeah. All right, so if you want the very famous quote, looking good.
Yeah, feeling good.
Feeling good. It's one of the greatest ending lines of all time.
It really is, and it's nice too that they spoiler take Denholm Elliott with them when they go. I would have felt bad if he got stuck because I think is the standout.
He's one of his arc too. Yeah, yeah. You almost wanted to put him in the Vacation too.
Exactly.
Right, but you always do those great. I love when movies do that. You're in this environment. It's kind of like unpleasant. It's wintry, but you go on vacation. The last scene.
Yeah, everybody ends up on an island.
Yeah, like Silence of the Lambs. Everybody's at the vacationing, or they do in an Ant-Man. They all go to the cabin together. One last scene and stuff like that. So, yeah, did the whole movie production go to the vacation too? You had to go on.
It's like that Lonely Island song. We made a song about Japan so we could go to Japan. Yeah. So that's a great.
Well, J.J. Abrams, we made a movie about islands so we can film in Hawaii. See you later.
Oh yeah, that'd been almost.
A TV show.
Yeah. So this movie, again, outside of its notable problem with that blackface scene, I think it's very funny. It's more subtle comedy than something like Coming to America, which I think had to do with, part of that is you're having Eddie Murphy play 8 people in that movie.
Right, but then Dan Aykroyd, he starts snotty.
Yeah.
But then eventually he
starts very prejudiced too.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that because like when he bumps into Eddie Murphy's character at the beginning of the film in the briefcase shuffle, his immediate thought is I'm being robbed. There's nothing in that scene that tells you you're being robbed. But he's so privileged and prejudiced that he just assumes.
Yeah.
And I think that's what kind of the most fun is that these two guys both have prejudices about each other that get very softly whittled away when they realize they're becoming each other.
Yeah. By trading places that they have very similar aspects and their journey's the same.
Yep.
Yeah.
The title is better than the original title, which was Black and White.
Oh.
It's a terrible title.
Ooh.
I'm shocked these screenwriters.
Could you imagine a title with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder and calling it Black and White? And,
yeah.
Oh.
And the poster would have probably been like a black and white poster with their negative space or something.
Oh my.
Yeah, I'm surprised these screenwriters went on to do something as fun as Space Jam because some of the choices they made in writing.
They did Space Jam?
They did Space Jam as well. But yeah, so Landis offered $100 to anyone who could come up with a better title, and someone did finally come up with Trading Places. So good on you, $100 person.
You got to give him $100, right? Yeah.
I think there is a sense of fun on the set with this movie. It is kind of a screwball comedy. But as I said before,
it's one of those works. Like you understand John Landis. It's one of those like if the take goes wrong, but if fits, you'll keep it in there.
Exactly. Sometimes, especially with comedies, sometimes your accidents are your scenes at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And you've got great comic timing from Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy is one of the great improv actors of our time.
Yeah.
And Dan Aykroyd isn't too bad either when it comes to those kinds of things. A lot of the funnier moments in Ghostbusters were things that came out of the interactions they had.
And you gotta understand, this came out 1 year before Clue, where John Landis was trying to get that movie Clue made by himself. So
Yeah.
I'm sure he's probably like, we can do this. I can do comedy in a mansion.
Yeah, exactly. Show me, I got this.
I got that right, yeah.
But the problem too is John Landis, while directing this film, was having a lot of behind-the-scenes issues. There was the famous death of 3 actors on his Twilight Zone film,
Right, the
which had happened
helicopter.
before this,
The helicopter
and that started kind of a thing with. Even though he made 3 movies with Eddie Murphy, there was always this resentment between him because he tried to get Eddie Murphy to be a character witness at his trial, and Eddie Murphy declined and said he wasn't going to do it. And they ended up working together on Coming to America because Eddie Murphy hired him to come in and do it. He wanted him to do it, kind of a throw you the bone.
Eddie's one of those people,
salvage.
if you try to tell him what to do, he's more reluctant to do it.
Yeah. And then in that film, they kind of had a bit of a falling out because of their mutual problems with each other before the film. Got back together and made, I think, easily one of the worst comedies ever with Beverly Hills Cop 3. Which I've tried it a couple of times. It has no redeeming
It's one of those
quality.
movies, like, I'm sure, like, midpoint of the movie, they're like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And so, I mean, part of me has always thought, like, Eddie Murphy had said in an interview, he goes, if you're responsible for killing 2 kids that weren't supposed to be on the set, maybe you should be going to trial. And so you can see that his ideas were very much like, you should be held responsible for it.
Yeah.
And you can see that they're having that kind of a thing where it's like, John Landis isn't as focused on Murphy and Aykroyd as you expect him to. There's a lot of this movie that spends time
There's
with
a
the
lot
two
more with the
villains.
2 Duke brothers.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, because when you do comedy, it's one of those things that we love to eviscerate is privilege and rich and white.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and we want to make them stupid as possible and make fun of them because what are they going to do? Right?
Yeah. Well, and it's very obvious at the time. We had the Reagan era economics. We had other films like They Live, touching on.
Well, this is a catalyst. This is start of like Wall Street.
Yep.
There's one with Kevin Bacon, or I can't remember, Quicksilver. Is that Kevin Bacon?
Okay.
Can't remember. Yeah.
Yeah, so they had a number of films that were kind of eviscerating this idea that, that the rich can stay rich and everybody else will benefit from that. And it's nice to see a movie that is so early in the 80s. That's like even before the time period when this was ramping up, going, oh, this is a problem. We're seeing it ahead of time. We're going to get at it.
But the formula still works. You could take 2 characters, put them in awkward situations.
Yep.
This is why Vice Versa works. This is where,
Yep.
a lot of the other movies where you take
The Changing Bodies movies, are very
bodies,
similar.
I think, Vince Vaughn just did a movie like that. Where the formula still works, but you have to have talent to project it.
Yeah, for a while I wasn't sure. This is the first time I'd seen this movie. I wasn't sure that there wasn't a magic element at the beginning until I realized it was just 2 brothers that switched these guys. But I thought for a second that they were just going to wake up.
Yeah, he's on his knee.
Yeah. Yeah, Eddie Murphy has that level of he can do offensive comedy and make it work more often than not. And yeah, like the way he portrays this homeless con man character at the start is very much, it's kind of offensive but self-denigrating at the same time.
Yes.
Like where he's throwing the bone out at you,
Absolutely.
but he's suffering for it.
Yeah, he can suffer through. Eddie likes to suffer through his art a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Dan Aykroyd.
But then he wants to get the accolades for something.
Yeah.
Give me the accolades for something suffering through my art.
Yeah, and then you get Dan Aykroyd, who I almost feel like he was a ghostwriter on the film because he ended up in scenes in romantic entanglements with 2 different women in this film. He was like going and fixing the script the night before or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think Denholm Elliott is my standout performance of the film because I'm only really aware of him from Indiana Jones work and then a few other side things, like he was in like the Tales from the Crypt movie, but like...
Yeah, Dan Aykroyd had a appearance in Temple of Doom.
That's true. So yeah, they teamed up there. He teamed up with Jamie Lee Curtis on My Girl, where they played people that fell in love again.
Yes,
so
right, yeah.
A lot of people that ended up working together a lot more frequently after this movie. So it sounded like it was a fun time.
And he went on to do Snobby again for Great Outdoors, Dan Aykroyd.
That's true. That's true. Oh, the movie was nominated for Best Original Score, which I thought was interesting, because it's a movie that plays so heavily on that. What was the song? The Marriage of Figaro.
Oh.
That I'm surprised it could even be eligible for Best Original Score.
Right.
But you have Elmer Bernstein, who's a very well-known score maker at that time.
Yes. Yeah.
The stuff that's not The Marriage of Figaro is pretty good. I'm just surprised it was enough to garner a nomination.
Exactly. It's full of surprises and continues surprise.
Yep.
And shock.
So final thoughts. I think, gosh, I wish this movie didn't have that one questionable scene in it. I can put up with really crass humor. I can put up with gorilla rape, I guess, but I can't put up with that one scene that really drags down the narrative.
With the clothes off, right?
Yeah.
All right. So I have seen Trading Places.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts on this film. Is it a movie that you've seen since your childhood? Is it one you just recently watched for the first time? We'd love to hear your thoughts on the film. What do you think about its staying lasting power in the genre? Does that scene really hurt it for you, or is it something you can kind of wash out because the rest of the movie is so much fun? Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and keep it civil, guys. We're here to have some fun. Don't forget you can like and subscribe. They're 2 free things. They don't take you any seconds. You can do it while we're talking right now. Go ahead and click those. And click on that Patreon link too. Check out the great tiers we have available, and you can help pick some movies. We're pretty much laid out for December, but if you join now, you're probably going to end up in our January rotation pretty quick there. So thank you guys for joining us. You can find all my film reviews over at goatfilmreviews.com.
And you can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. And gosh, I want orange juice now.